on after coming out from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. So I'll just give one more quick minute and then get going. All right. So we do have a pretty packed agenda today, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for the first meeting of 2022. And so we have a pretty packed agenda. As I mentioned, first we'll have Allison join us for some quick updates just regarding general research. After that, we'll talk about clinicaltrials.gov and then the use of OnCore for financials. And then we'll have a quick discussion after that. So a couple of notes. We are going to do some polls again, like we've done in previous meetings. In addition to that, there will be a SurveyMonkey link that I think Matt will likely put into the chat, or maybe he already has, I'm not sure. Yep, there it is.
I just put it in, thank you.
Perfect. So if you all can go and click on that link and kind of answer those questions, that will be helpful for us and can potentially drive some of the discussion today as well. So I think that's everything with that. I will go ahead and turn it over to Allison really quickly for her updates.
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm here mainly, I think, to answer any questions or provide clarification based on the communication that went out from the Chancellor and from Dr. Flagg from the VC for Research last week. Recognizing that when we try and send out communication, we've got to be very specific as to who we're talking about and which policies apply. So any communication coming from the Chancellor or from the VC for Research is for space where research is being conducted on the Anschutz campus. Obviously, you have to follow the policies and procedures in the hospitals if you're working in an affiliated hospital. So if there's a discrepancy between the two, then you follow the hospitals if you're in their space. So for on campus, if you have an approved study and you need to do face-to-face subject visits, then it's business as normal. Just to reiterate that we're back to social distancing, screening of participants, wearing masks, both for the participant and for you as the research team. But otherwise, there's no restrictions on research at this point in time. And I will say the numbers are looking like they're heading in the right direction. So I don't anticipate that will change, but we keep thinking that this is going to move on and we're still here. So I can only tell you where we are today. Now, what I will say is at least for the month of January, we are strongly trying to encourage only monitors on campus that really need to, if you've got a monitoring visit that has been delayed for the holidays, that's essential, then obviously you can go ahead. But if you can delay it, the preference is to wait until February. It is perfectly acceptable to be asking any monitors that they be vaccinated and to get something in writing to that effect, and to be requiring mask wearing again for the monitor. Same with site initiation visits. We're trying very hard, at least again till February, to not be doing face-to-face site visits unless we have to. But again, there's always the exceptions. You've got to do what you need to do. That is different for community-based research, so research that's not happening on the Anschutz campus, but is happening not in the affiliates, external to the campus, then, you know, there still is an activation approval process for COVID in place and training requirements. So that process has not changed. And a lot of our community partners right now are very hesitant to be collaborating on research in the community. So not only do you need university approval, but really working with your community partners to make sure that it is feasible to be doing the research in the community at this point in time. It is not to say we don't have research that's happening, but obviously we're just being very thoughtful about it. There's been a number of questions about which masks to wear, and I think there's a lot of literature out there. Right now, again, follow the hospital policies if you're working in the hospital. If you're on the Anschutz campus, then, you know, a well-fitting mask is the best protection. If you need a KN95, you can now there is a purchasing through CU Marketplace, and we have access to KN95s. We are strongly encouraging people to use KN95s rather than N95s because there are OSHA requirements and fit testing that has to happen with N95s, and you should only be using those if you're having direct aerosol contact with known COVID participants. So if you really need an N95, then you go through EH&S and go through the normal process for N95s. But otherwise, it's a well-fitting mask. And again, some of the hospitals are requiring face shields, I think, but we are not on campus at this point in time. We are in conversations with the hospitals so that we're all kind of trying to align, but recognize that there are going to be differences between the university expectations and the hospitals, and that's largely because the hospitals have an urgent clinical need that is a little bit different from where the university feels it needs to monitor. So our stances are going to be just a little bit different. I think that is everything, but I'm more than happy to answer questions if anybody has questions. If you have questions later, don't hesitate to reach out. And Matt, I think I'd ask if Matt can put the link in for the community activation in the chat too. That would be great.
Will do.
Thanks.
Great, thanks. Does anyone have any questions for Allison right now? If you do, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you know, you can unmute and talk. No. Okay. All right. Thanks, Allison, for that quick update. I know it's greatly appreciated to understand exactly what the thought process is behind all those communications. So thank you for that.
No, and just to add in just because the campus isn't making any decisions about slowing down research or holding anything up, doesn't mean that as a research team, you don't have to think about the logistics and what's feasible and what's not. So it's very much on the research teams. And what we're seeing with this surge is really a staffing capacity issue as much as anything. So, you know, just being careful about, from a business continuity perspective, not having all your research team in one place at the same time. So if somebody does test positive, then you are all in quarantine for a bit. So just kind of thinking that through and recognizing what's feasible to do with the resources that you have. So that can very much fall on you. It's not being dictated to by the university at this point. So I know there's a lot of people are struggling with people being out sick. So, you know, it's important to take care of yourselves and take care of your research team.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely know that my team has felt a little bit of a pinch in making sure that we've got you know, everything staffed appropriately as we've dealt with people who have gotten sick and had to be out for a little bit for quarantine. So certainly understand that. All right, so we will go ahead and move on. The next thing we're going to do is some really quick polls. And so I think they should have just popped up here. So if you want to go ahead and respond to those, this is just, again, helpful for us to understand who's coming to this meeting. And so we can help to make sure that we're preparing the agenda as much as we can for the appropriate audience. All right. Thank you for the quick responses there. All right, here's the next poll. Okay. And then the next poll regarding current challenges that we're facing, or that you and your team feel like you're facing with research on campus right now.
And Aaron, I would just add that there's a similar question to this on the SurveyMonkey poll. And the reason we're also doing a SurveyMonkey poll is that we can have open-ended questions. So if any of these preloaded questions, like the other at the bottom, we'd love to hear very more specifics. So in the chat, there's a link to the SurveyMonkey. It looks like 7 people have responded so far. If people have input, we'd love to hear your feedback.
Thanks for clarifying that, Matt. Yeah, I think it's important for us to get as much of that feedback as we can get. And I know these you know, kind of canned responses don't often capture individual challenges. All right. All right, I think, Natasha, is that the last of them?
That was the last one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, thank you for everyone for providing the feedback. All right, next we'll go ahead and move on. So Aaron McDonough is going to come in and discuss clinicaltrials.gov and the requirements for that for research on campus. So I will go ahead and stop sharing and turn this over to Aaron.
All right, thank you so much, Erin. Let me just go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so as Erin said, my name is Erin McDonough. I am a regulatory facilitator with the Clinical Research Support Center. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about clinicaltrials.gov and the requirements and how we manage it here at the university. This presentation is a little bit dense, but I don't expect you to, remember all of this or, memorize it by heart. I just want you to walk away with a general sense of how to think about your research in the context of clinicaltrials.gov and the resources that you can go to for some help. So some of you may be very familiar with clinicaltrials.gov, and by extension, you're probably very familiar with me, but others, this may be a little bit new to you. Clinicaltrials.gov is a public online registry of clinical trials, and it's the largest clinical trial database in the world. It's run by NLM over at NIH, and some trials are registered voluntarily, but many trials are required to be registered on the database by law or by policy. For each clinical trial, the record is going to include some standardized information about the study, and then if it's required or voluntarily reported, it may also include tabular results data for that study and study documents such as the protocol and the informed consent form. So, the big question, which trials must be registered? The short answer is that most interventional studies of health-related outcomes in humans are going to be required for some reason or another to be registered on clinicaltrials.gov. The first layer of that, and the most closely regulated layer, is the applicable clinical trials that are regulated by the FDA and required by law to be registered. These are interventional investigations that are not phase 1 or early device feasibility studies, which is basically like 10 people or less, the kind of device version of a phase 1. That evaluate a drug, biologic, or device product regulated by the FDA, including approved products. Those studies are required to be registered on clinicaltrials.gov, and that's overseen by the FDA. Clinical trials funded or supported by NIH are also required to be registered, and their definition of a clinical trial is a little bit broader than that. They include behavioral interventions, and they include those early device feasibility and phase 1 trials as well in their definitions. So if you have a trial like that funded or supported by NIH, you will need to register that study on clinicaltrials.gov if the trial begins on or after January 18th, 2017. In addition, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or ICMJE, requires that their member journals require all clinical trials according to their definition also be registered. They define a clinical trial as any research project that prospectively assigns people to an intervention with or without a comparison group to study the relationship between a health-related intervention and a health outcome. So it's very broad. It includes behavioral interventions. So if you have an interventional trial in humans that's studying a health outcome, if you want to publish, you're probably going to need to register your study on clinicaltrials.gov. And then in addition to that, other funders may require studies be registered. The VA does. In addition, PCORI actually requires that if you have PCORI funding for a trial, even if it's an observational trial, it needs to be registered on clinicaltrials.gov. And finally, if you are conducting a qualifying clinical trial and any routine costs are going to be billed to Medicare, you're going to need a clinicaltrials.gov ID, which is called an NCT number. So you'll need to register those trials as well. So in addition to registering, certain trials are also required to report basic results data to clinicaltrials.gov. Of those trials I just discussed, the ACTs, those federally regulated trials, are required to report results, as well as those funded or supported by NIH. And in addition, other funders may require that you report results. The VA does, and PCORI requires that you report results to clinicaltrials.gov. And I'll talk a little bit about more what that means in a moment. So here at CU, The question that we're often asking is who is responsible for the record? And it's pretty straightforward. If it's an industry-sponsored study, then the drug or device company is going to post that. They'll take care of the record. You don't need to worry about it. But if it is a CU investigator-initiated study, then the PI is going to be responsible for registering the study, keeping that record up to date, and submitting the results. They're going to be the record owner for that clinicaltrials.gov record. If the PI leaves the institution, they need to resolve that record before they leave. I can't tell you how many times we've had to track people down at their new jobs, or had to track down, maybe some study team members who might be able to provide some of the data, but all of that can be avoided. Just get in touch with us if your PI is leaving, or if you're a PI who's leaving the institution, and we can check on your records for you and make sure that everything is resolved, either closed out or transferred to a new PI before you leave the institution. PIs don't have to go it alone. They can also delegate tasks to their study team members by giving them access to the record, so your coordinators can have access as well. For cancer center studies, it's only slightly different. For the initial registration only, the cancer center's administrator will complete the initial registration of the record for you, and then they'll hand that record off to the PI to approve it, and then to maintain it and report results going forward. So when do you need to register and update a record? Registration, if required, the law says register within 21 days of enrollment of the first subject, but you can ignore that entirely. In practice, you want to register prior to beginning enrollment. This is because the ICMJE requires that registration be completed prior to the start of enrollment. So if you want to publish, you definitely want to register prior to starting your enrollment process. For updates, the record should just be a living document. It needs to be updated at least every 12 months just to verify that everything is current. But you also want to update it within 30 days of a change to information in the record. Contact information, study status, if you've amended any of the information in your record, like your outcome measures, you just want to do that on an ongoing basis, because it can look a little bit to journal editors like reporting bias if you make a bunch of updates at the very end. So just keep in mind it's a living document. When you're updating anything else about your study, just check your clinicaltrials.gov record. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about what information needs to be registered, but this is an overview of the modules. For the study identification part, you just want to make sure that you're including your grant number and listing your funding bodies as collaborators. That'll help us help you understand the requirements around your record and your reporting. You want to make sure that the study status section is accurate to the actual status of your study. It may be completed, terminated, not yet recruiting, or recruiting. There's an active not recruiting status. That means that you're still seeing patients, you're just no longer enrolling. And for your outcome measures, you want to make sure that you're registering all primary and secondary outcome measures that are specified in your protocol. If you have ones that are specified as exploratory explicitly in your protocol, you don't have to register them, but otherwise make sure that you're registering all primary and secondary outcome measures. We have great registration instructions available on our website. You can email Clinical Research Support Center at ucdenver.edu to request a clinicaltrials.gov account if you need access, or if members of your study team need access to your records. Also, if you just have any questions, always feel free to reach out to us. So, when do you need to submit results? For certain trials, the ones I discussed earlier, results are going to be required no later than 12 months after the primary completion date. This primary completion date definition causes a lot of confusion, because as researchers, we're used to thinking of the end of the study as being, when we close to IRB, or when data analysis is complete, or when we publish. But the primary completion date doesn't take any of that into account. For clinicaltrials.gov definitions, the primary completion date is the date the final subject was examined or received an intervention for the purposes of final data collection for the primary outcome measures. And the study completion date, which you'll also enter, is the same thing, but for primary and secondary outcome measures and adverse events. Those two dates will generally be the same unless you have long-term follow-up for your secondary outcome measures, and they'll generally be your last participant's last study visit. Once you reach that date, once you reach that last participant's last study visit, that 12-month clock starts ticking. So just keep that in mind. It sounds a little bit scary, but the data needed is actually really, really simple. So the results data that's required breaks down into 4 modules. First, you have participant flow, and that's just basically a table version of a consort diagram. That's going to be how many people started versus finished each period of your study, and how many dropped out along the way in each arm. Baseline characteristics is just your participant demographic information. Your outcome measures data is going to be very basic tables of your primary and secondary outcome measures that you registered when you registered your study. It's just going to be tables where the measurement is the row and the arms are the columns. So, you know, if one of your outcome measures is systolic blood pressure at 12 weeks, the measurement would be the row. You have your 2 columns for your 2 arms if the study has 2 arms, and then you'll enter your data there. And it's all aggregate, it's not individual participant data. And then finally, there's the adverse events module, which is just all serious adverse events and any adverse events that occurred at a frequency over a certain threshold. The maximum is 5%. They don't want any narrative interpretation of the data that's actually against the rules and the regulations. They just want the most basic version of your data. So if you keep these in mind as you're conducting your study, you may be ready to report just about when the study ends. There are step-by-step tutorials available online, but you don't even need to go it alone that much. Just get in touch with Clinical Research Support Center at ucdenver.edu. We can set up a time with you to help you enter the results data so that you don't have to fight with the modules or anything alone. And usually if you have all the data ready, we can knock it out in an hour and then it's off your plate forever. So it's not quite as scary as it sounds. That 12-month clock, you probably won't even need it. So, you know, this may seem like a lot of requirements, and it may seem like a very rapidly changing list of requirements as more and more organizations institute policies requiring registration and results submission. But there are some reasons behind why you want to make sure that you register and submit results compliantly and on time. The first is obviously just compliance. The FDA has the authority to issue a notice of non-compliance, which is permanently public. And they issued 3 of those last year. So they've been really ramping up enforcement. One of those was actually issued directly to an academic investigator. So it's definitely something you want to keep in mind as not just a nebulous threat anymore. They're also allowed to issue civil monetary penalties for those violations if they're not resolved within 30 days. NIH policy also allows them to deny future funding. They may come back to you with questions about, you know, future funding if you have outstanding results. We've heard of things happen like that at the university. They're also allowed to terminate your funding and even conduct grants recovery actions. There's also, of course, you know, the moral and scientific imperative, the obligation to participants who you may be publishing in a journal, but again, they may not be able to see that if they're not, you know, able to access that medical journal. So it's a great way to get that data out there that you've collected from your participants who took the time to participate in your study, so that they can see it in a real way and interpret it. That's kind of the intent of clinicaltrials.gov is as this clinical trial data transparency tool. And, you know, even if you have a trial that maybe didn't go the way that you wanted, having that information out there so that somebody in the scientific community doesn't repeat that, even if you've decided not to publish, it's a really great way to keep, you know, funds from being used in an effort that has been done before and was realized not to work. So With those two imperatives in mind, there are a lot of transparency and advocacy watchdogs out there that really lobby for accurate and complete reporting to clinicaltrials.gov. There is FDA Trials Tracker, which lists every institution in Mind's data directly from clinicaltrials.gov. So if you have late ACT results, they'll post them there. And there's other groups as well that issue regular reports on who is submitting their clinicaltrials.gov results and who isn't. We were actually, we were on one of those lists a while back of, institutions that needed to submit their results. And we've undertaken a massive project getting some of those older trials reported, really supporting our investigators in getting that data entered and made public. And we've gone from 66% compliance back when this report was first issued back in April to now we're above 95% compliance, which is better than the national average of 75%. But it's an ongoing effort and it takes all of our researchers, and we're very, very grateful for your commitment and your time towards these compliance efforts. So, but you don't need to, as I said, you don't need to memorize all these requirements. You don't need to be an expert on how to use clinicaltrials.gov or the modules. We're here to help. We know that you're busy. If you have questions, if you need access to clinicaltrials.gov or you need to register a study, if you're not sure if you need to register a study or report results, or if you're a little concerned that maybe you're late or you have some outstanding records you haven't been able to get to for a while, or you're just not sure where you stand, no shame at all. We're happy to help. We know that these are complicated compliance issues. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with Clinical Research Support Center at ucdenver.edu, and we'll be happy to help you out with any questions you have. And I think that is about it. Does anyone have any questions regarding clinicaltrials.gov? All right, I'm not seeing any, but so I will go ahead and stop sharing and turn things back over. Thanks, everyone.
I'm just going to put a plug in, please. I just want to reiterate what Erin's saying. The goal is to help you be compliant. It's in nobody's interest for you to be struggling. So please reach out. The team is there for you to help you be successful. But it's becoming clearer that we have to be compliant. This is no longer optional. So it's impacting grant funding, and it's going to impact your research team's ability to do their research. So please, please, please make it happen. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin, for talking through all of that. I know I've had a few studies that have gone through that we've had questions about whether they need to be posted or not, and the team has done a great job of helping me and the investigators that I'm working with better understand why they may need to be or why they may not need to be. So the team, I can't speak highly enough about their helpfulness to be able to help figure it all out, because it's not super clear. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And you are also allowed to register studies voluntarily. Just keep that in mind. It's a great recruitment tool, clinicaltrials.gov. So if there's studies that maybe you're on the fence about, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to answer questions about those too.
So Erin, one question did come in is, can you share these slides with everybody?
Yes, absolutely. Natasha has my slides. Would you mind, Natasha, sending them out to everybody? I don't have a list of attendees, but
Absolutely. When this is done, we will send out the slides to everyone and make them available. And there will be a recording of this entire session, so we can direct folks to the recording as well. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions for Erin? No. All right. Okay. Well, we will go ahead and move on. I do want to again mention the SurveyMonkey. I think it's we really want to try to get as much feedback as we can from that, so we can understand, what the community wants from this meeting and just in general with research on campus. So if we can get you guys to respond to that survey, that would be much appreciated. I think Matt just put the link in the chat again. So
I did. Thank you, Aaron. We're getting some really good responses and some great feedback. If anybody has information for us that they'd like to share, or just your general pitfalls and struggles with research on campus, also about what's going well, please hit that link. We set this up so it could be open-ended and you can give us as much information as you want. So thank you for participating.
all right, so with that, we are going to turn it over to Mari Peterson and Brian Villanueva from the HCTU group to tell us a little bit more about how their team uses OnCore.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mari Peterson. I am the administrator for the Division of Hematology, and I'm going to do just a really quick slideshow of how our clinical trial unit uses the financial OnCore console. And then Brian Villanueva, who is our finance manager for the hematology clinical trials unit, will do a quick demo afterwards. And then we're happy to answer any questions. And we just have a few survey questions related to the financials in OnCore after the presentation. Oh, do we want to do them now or after the presentation, Natasha?
I just launched them, but we can do them at the end. Let's just hold off to the end. Sorry about that.
No problem. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so a little bit about us. The Hematology Clinical Trials Unit has about 30 employees dedicated to our clinical trials. We specialize in high acuity interventional trials, mainly industry and IIT. We do have a few cooperative trials as well. A large portion of our trials are immunotherapy focused. We are a bench to bedside division of hematology, and we've used the breadth of the OnCore financial suite for the past 6 years. Drop that. So when we, 6 years ago, when we decided to go full on with OnCore financials, we had to make a few changes to how we did both pre and post award. One of the things we did is we restructured our finance team. We have 3.5 FTEs. Out of that, one is a budget specialist, one is a finance manager. We have a full-time finance specialist and a part-time finance specialist. We also decided to streamline our budgeting practices. With pharma ever changing, we decided to be able to use OnCore to the fullest, that we had to kind of put some kind of rules into place when we did our negotiation. So we don't allow withholding, we don't accept screen fill ratios, and our statement of fees are non-negotiable. And that allows us to have consistent nomenclature, especially when we do invoiceables between our different trials. And then we've also revamped our post-award activities, both with the invoicing and collections. And our goal is always to do finances in real time for both accounts receivable and accounts payable. So the first thing we do, our budget specialist, who handles all of our new budget requests, our amendment requests, uses the budgets that come from OnCore. So the calendar builders in OnCore build the calendar, and then the Medicare coverage analysis is added on top of that. She takes that document, exports it into an Excel spreadsheet, and with a few minor changes, we're able to have a budget that she can then start negotiating with the farmers, or with the pharma company we're working with. She does minor formatting. She adds our staff labor fees, F&A, invoiceable items, and inflation. And then we verified that billing designation is correct, SOC versus billable to study. And what we've gained with that is reduced effort to create internal budgets, higher level of accuracy, and improved budgeting tool to communicate across the campus with the different partners we've worked with. The next thing in OnCore is invoicing. because of our consistent nomenclature, we're able to invoice protocol-related fees, which are now based on triggers, efficiently. Since all of them have the same titles, the same dollar amounts, it's easy for our finance specialists to work within OnCore. Now that we know that our contracts matches OnCore, and then our sponsors are used to that consistent language that we use. We also do the subject pass-through invoiceable fees, and those are based on data entered by our CRCs when patient activity occurs, and then milestones when a patient visit actually happens. With the invoicing, and kind of what we've grown over the years, is our document management. And so we have copies of all of our financial documents maintained in one system. So we have our OnCore invoice copies. We have UC Health, CU Medicine bills, WERB and other outside invoices, and then payment details received from the sponsor. And currently we are working on a project pilot with OGC, and they're able to review, they can go into any of our trials, and when they receive payment details for any of our payments, they're able to upload those directly to the applicable study that it applies to. And that has been a big game changer for us when we're doing our reconciliation of the payments. And the reconciliation then brings us to the reports that we're able to pull. So we want to know aging and accounts receivable. It's important for us. We have a significant amount of trials that we work through. And as I said, they're high acuity, so they're complex trials. So to make sure we're not leaving any money on the table, we have different mechanisms to make sure that we're sending out invoices in a timely manner, and then collecting payments on the same note. So we're able to look at aging in different places. So the first one is we're able to see trial unit level. All of our invoices, and this is kind of an example down to the left, all of our invoices are billed through OnCore, and then when we have a payment, we put them in through the payables section, and then we can see if we have anything outstanding. So at the trial level, we can go into OnCore and actually look what has occurred for that trial, see what's outstanding, and if anything, and how many days it's outstanding too. And then that lets us work with our clinical trial agreement to hold sponsors accountable to the number of days as to when they need to pay us. And then there's sponsor level up to the division level as well. And so we use both OnCore, the aging report, and we use insights. On the right, where it says financial outstanding invoices, sponsor receivable trends, those are insights reports that have been really helpful for us to clean up our aging. And then our next one, let's see here. We also track effort. Our CRC, data coordinator, PI, and admin time effort in OnCore. So we budget labor for staff time per the milestone. And then each month we're able to pull applicable report that shows us all the milestones from the current month that occurred based on the labor that we negotiated in the contracts. And then we have a report that has a macros built into it that turns the information into appropriate fields that can then be uploaded into PeopleSoft. So real time each month, whenever a patient is seen, we're able to look at that, transfer the money from the Fund 30 to the applicable Fund 28s and 26s that we have set up. So we're able to realize our revenue in real time each month. And that has been a big game changer for us as well. We have had to be a little bit creative. So there were a few things that we had to do, what we call our workarounds, where we don't allow withholding on new trials. We do have older trials that still have withholding on them. And what we noticed is when we pay an invoice on the aging report at the trial level, the payment would show that it had posted, but the invoice or the withholding would show as aging. So even though the withholding is not due until the end of the trial, it was still aging for us and it was skewing our data. So what we do is we show the aging, the withholding as paid, and then we have ongoing invoices that we've created for each of the trials that have the withholding, and we track per each invoice how much that amount is, and we keep it active. So we don't put a date to it. We don't actually make that invoice go live until the trial is over, and we're actually able to collect the withholding at that time. So that workaround has allowed us to keep accurate aging for some of our older trials that do have withholding. So throughout the years, we've kind of had to become a little bit creative, but we found that with minor adjustments on our side, OnCore truly has made it a lot more feasible for us to manage all of the trials that we have. And we do, one aspect that we do outside of OnCore is we did complete or created a smart sheet tracker for all of our pipeline activities. And we do this outside of OnCore. We do know that there's data represented in OnCore that could tell us some of the information that we're looking at, but we really want to be able to track time and intervals and staff effort at a granular level. And so that's something that we're currently working on that we're really excited about. And it's definitely a complement to OnCore and the finances that we use as well. A quick recap, we've gained reduced human effort, human resources expenses, greater efficiencies, financial controls, and multiple reporting tools. And for us, that has allowed significant growth throughout our clinical trial over the last 6 years, while being able to manage everything in OnCore, which has been significant for our team. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then Brian is going to do a live demo for us of how we use some of the different applications in the financial console. If there's anything that he doesn't show that you'd like to see, please let us know and we'd be happy to review that as well. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Like Mari said, I am Brian Villanueva, the finance manager for the hematology clinical trials unit. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Oops, helps if I click on the share button. There we go. Now can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm already logged into OnCore. Like Mari said, we are trying to use OnCore's tools to, to make everything as easy as possible for us. As she mentioned, with creating the budgets, we download everything out of OnCore once the calendar has been entered and once the MCA review has been completed. We pull it from the coverage analysis console. And then just depending on how many arms the study has, we go into the billing grid and we pull every applicable arm that we plan to enroll on. As Mari said, we do pull this into an Excel spreadsheet. The formatting's essentially the same as you see here. The nice thing is when we do pull into the Excel spreadsheet, anything you see here that has a plus, these are various items listed under hematology. All of these lines do show up in the Excel spreadsheet for us. We will then go back, we review designations. In most cases, we're not going to change anything. Everything typically stays the same, unless there are a few things that either the PI or if we have like a budget master file from the sponsor that they're maybe designating something as SOC, we will go and ask the PI about that for clarification. We will also work with our clinical trials team, the clinic staff, to make sure that the way the schedule is set up, again, it's based on the schedule of events in the protocol. We want to make sure that this is correct, that all procedures are being captured appropriately. And then once we have a fully negotiated budget, and again, like Mari said, we do add our labor fees and everything into this. Once we have a fully negotiated agreed to budget, that gets sent to OnCore for them to then enter the financials. Once financials are entered, I do what is called the pre-award review, where I will take a look at our internal budget, compare it to our billing grid, and this is where I am making sure that procedures are happening on the correct days, the fees are appropriate. I review everything for labor, for procedures, for protocol related items, invoiceable items, All of that is reviewed during the pre-award review. And then that is also where we are setting up our triggers. We're trying to make this as automated as possible so that the system is working for us and not the other way around. Let me go into the invoicing. I'm going to go into a different study. So under Financials Console, at the time of pre-award review, for our protocol related items, these are where I will set up our triggers. They can be date-based, they can be based on IRB review. Whatever is appropriate for the particular item in general is how we're going to set that up. Date-based can be set up weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever is most appropriate as far as invoicing goes. For anything for IRB review, that can be for continuing reviews, any submissions to IRB with a full review, expedited review. All of these triggers can be set up. I can actually go into one and take a look to show you. So here is something. Once it loads, there we go. Like I said, trigger type is IRB review, reason, amendment, change review, general correspondence, anything that your regulatory group is doing, review type expedited full. So once this particular activity happens, it should trigger in the system, creating an invoiceable item for you to pull into an invoice that can then be sent to the sponsor. Again, all of these should trigger into invoiceable items out here. It tells you the triggering types, IRB review, an anticipated problem, date-based triggers here. So these are the triggers, like Mari said, we're trying to automate this as much as possible so that they are there for us. We pull them into an invoice and then we send that invoice out to the sponsor. Let me go into our milestone items. So as Mari was saying, with regards to milestone items, all of our labor fees are tied to these milestones. So our CRCs, our data coordinators, administration, if applicable. The only thing that is not tied to this is our regulatory staff's time. Again, those are when these triggers are happening up here, and then we will invoice for any appropriate staff time for regulatory. Let me go over. Pass-through items, again, these are procedures that don't happen necessarily regularly. So these might be an invoiceable item, whether it be an after-hours blood draw, but as the visit occurs, it would trigger a venipuncture if it was appropriate. Otherwise, it can be marked as NA. Again, it's just easier for us to see everything, for us to pull into an invoice and then to send to the sponsor. As Mari had said, with regards to aging, we can see all of our invoices as they have occurred. Anything that is outstanding, it gives us the aging in days here. But she also mentioned that in Insights, we can also look at that. And I will go ahead and pull that up really quick. This is just through the Advara. You put in your full email address, and then it will bring you to this login screen. And right here in the dashboards, outstanding invoices, and we can set up our filters just to look at anything specific to HCTU. This might actually take a little while. Oh, actually pretty quick. So this, this is kind of everything that's out there in OnCore right now. This is an upload from OnCore. Any changes done in OnCore will need to be applied overnight, but you do see everything. You can change it, different breakdowns. You can invoice number, you can see by sponsor, you can see by send date, protocol number. There are a number of different ways for you to filter this to get information that is appropriate for your unit. And then, as Mari also mentioned, we are tracking our withholding. We keep that in an ongoing invoice. What we're doing here is just listing the withholding. For this particular sponsor, I believe the withholding is 5%. We notate in the comments field for which invoice the withholding is for, so that we're tracking it every time we're reconciling our accounts. And then once we are getting to a point where we're ready to close the study, we can send this out to the sponsor to verify that, you know, the withholding amounts that we have are in line with what they have, so that there is no confusion or no delay in payments for the withholding. And then she also mentioned the pilot program with OGC and entering some of the finance detail. That is listed in the attachments, and I don't know if this one has any. Oh, actually it does. So here, OGC for payments, the accounts receivable group for OGC has posted a payment. They attached the detail in OnCore. We can open it, take a look. In some cases, it might just be the bank statement for the university, but it still gives us enough information that if we need the payment details from the sponsor, we can reference check number, we can reference the transaction number. We have the information that we need to go back to the sponsor and ask them, you know, if this was for patient visits, you know, can you send us the full breakdown of the patient visits that was paid on this check? So it's easier for us to then get the information that we need to make sure that we're reconciling our accounts and staying on top of all of our patient visits as they are occurring and making sure that the payments are being applied appropriately. That's all I really had. Any questions?
So Brian and Mari, it does look like there's a question in the chat.
Yes.
How did you initially evaluate the level of coordinator and PI effort needed for each line item? And do you vary that by protocol complexity?
Mari, did you want to?
Happy to take that. Absolutely. So we have a dollar amount that we charge for each of the different groups. So we have a dollar amount set to our PIs, to our CRCs, data coordinator, and to our admin team. And then once our budget specialist pulls down the budget, we are able to see each visit, how many hours for each of those groups we need. So it's a really simple calculation. CRC screening are going to need 3 hours. And so we're able to put that information in. We do have some trials that are more complex, so they would have more hours associated to each milestone. And then we have some very basic ones that just have minimal information that we have to input. And so that would be less time. And we found that has worked really well with our pharma, being able to negotiate in that manner. They seem to appreciate the hourly rate, and then they too can see based on the activities for each milestone what is occurring. And so it's easier for them. We found it easier for them to approve the budgets that way.
Awesome. Thank you for further clarifying that. Any other questions? We're at the top of the hour now, so I think we are out of time. So if you do have other questions, definitely feel free to contact. You can reach out through the clinical research connections at coanschutz.edu. Question or email. We did just launch the poll here as well. Again, I know we're kind of out of time here, but if you could take a quick chance to respond to that as well, that may be helpful for us to gather that information. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions? All right. Well, thanks everyone for attending the meeting today. I really appreciate it and hope you all have a great week.